You can make the layers appear or disappear in quite a few different ways. Two of the most common ways are as follows. Let's say, for example, you want this interface of the clock to fade in gradually. So for that, let me just go and select the clock layer. And I'm going to press the letter T to open up opacity. And I'll do the same for the center as well. I'll press T to open up opacity. And just for now, I'm going to hide the second layer here just by selecting this and pressing R or U on the keyboard. And I'll go right back to the beginning of my timeline as my first step, so go to time. And I'm going to set the value now. The opacity of this clock is going to be 0. So I'm going to go and set this to 0. And then I'll create a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch. And then I'll change the time. Let's say I want this to happen over 10 frames. So I'm going to press Shift and page down. And then finally, I'll update the value. So I'll just go here and update the opacity value from 0% to 100%. And that should animate now to go from completely transparent to fully opaque over 10 frames. Let me zoom in here so I can show you one more thing. You see that we have two layers here. One is the second hand and the other one is the center. So if I go back to the beginning, you see my second hand isn't doing anything, and also this center point isn't doing anything. Now if you want the same opacity animation to be applied to both of those layers as well, all you have to do is to click on the word opacity and then press Command C, or you can go to Edit, Copy, and then select the other layers, the center layer and the second layer, and then you just press Command V and it will paste the same keyframes onto the selected layers. If I now press U and then U again, I can see those keyframes here as well. So if you now go back, Shift and /, and if I click outside to deselect them, and if I play it, just spacebar, you see this whole thing will fade in over 10 frames. Then the animation starts. And of course, I can slow these down. So if I select the second keyframes for all the opacity properties here, I can then drag them towards right, and then again hold the Shift key down. So these will snap to the first keyframe of the rotation here, or the position. And if I now play it, you'll see that the opacity animation is going to take 1 second to complete. And after that, the rest of the animations will start. The second way of making the layers appear at different times is by literally dragging the layers in the timeline. So let me scroll down on the timeline first. For example, let's say you don't want this first line of text to appear right at the beginning. I can just click on the layer itself, provided that I have my selection tool selected. I can click on the layer itself anywhere on this orange bar, and then drag this towards right, and I'm making this layer appear at a later point. Let's say, for example, I want this to appear around about 3 seconds, and I can actually use my playhead as a reference there. So if I just put it there as a guide, just drag it towards right, and I can hold down the Shift key so it snaps again. And now, the first line of text is only going to appear on the 3rd second mark. So if I go and play it, you see it won't be there until 3 seconds, then it pops up. And I can stagger them. So I can put the second line to be a little bit later than the first one, and then the third one to be a little later than the second one, and then this to be a little bit later than the third one, and then finally the 5th step will be somewhere here. And if I go and play this, you see that they'll all come in one by one. This is different than keyframing the opacity, whereas with opacity you could make this gradually come up, and with this it just comes up like that, it just pops up. And how do you make them disappear? Well, you can trim the end of these. Let me go right towards the end of my timeline, let's say here. Let's say at this point I want the first layer to disappear, so I can select this, and I'll tell you a really useful shortcut now, and that is Alt and the square brackets. If I hold down Alt and then press the right square bracket, that's going to trim the end of my layer. I can select the other layer and then go forward a little bit, and then do Alt, right square bracket. And I can select the 7th layer, not by clicking on it, but by pressing number 7 on the numeric keypad. And then I'll go forward by a couple of frames using my page down button on the keyboard. And then I'll hold down Alt and the right square bracket. And then number 8 on the numeric keypad, and page down a few times, and Alt and right bracket. And again, this time number 9, page down a few times, and Alt and right bracket. You see I've done this whole thing without touching the mouse. If I now go back to the beginning, again by pressing the home key on the keyboard, and if I play it, you see that the clock will fade in gradually, then it will start animating together with the car. Then once the car and the clock stop moving, the text will appear one by one, and then they'll disappear starting from about 8 seconds. Here we go. And now they should start disappearing.